Right, finally. Right, we're live. Welcome to the show, everyone. Happy Saturday, the 30th of July / 31st, right, in July? Yeah, 31st of July, if you're on the other side of the date line and you're listening. Welcome to the show, episode, what number are we on? 61? Thanks for waiting around. If you're that delay at the start, we were waiting for Tom. Funny story, right? You know he's always late because he don't get up. Well, this week he got up. Well, he was still up, right? In our staff group chat, he was like, "Oh, I'm still up. I've not been to bed yet." And then the guy's fallen asleep 10 minutes before the show starts. So he's passed out in his chair. Oh, he's getting old, right? Falling asleep in his chair before the show starts. Anyway, if Tom wakes up during the show, I'm pretty sure he'll join us. But as of right now, Tom's cancelled. Right?
Wasn't he awake just before that as well, showing off his new dog or something?
Yeah.
That's what I was just saying.
Lads, look at my dog. Yeah, now I'm gonna go to sleep and just ignore the podcast again. Wah, 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 wah.
I mean, normally it's the opposite way around, though, right? That's the funny part about it. Normally it's because Tom's in China. This is the thing. Give him a little bit of slack. I know we're cancelling him right now, but let's cancel him fairly. He's in China, right? And I know Vito is also in China, so there's no excuse. But Vito, what time is it in China right now?
It's in the morning.
Yeah. What time in the morning, though?
6
a.m, right? Exactly, 6 a.m. So there you go. That's the little bit of slack Tom gets. It's the fact that he's got to get up at 5, 6 a.m. to present these shows. But, you know, the guy was up and he fell asleep, but he's getting old, so we'll let him off. We'll send him a pipe and some slippers, right? Because it sounds like he needs them.
A walking stick as well.
Mm-hmm. And a fucking alarm clock that works. Anyway, welcome to the show if you're listening. Don't forget to press like. Welcome to the show if you're listening back as well on YouTube. Also press like. If you're listening live, chuck comments in the chat. Talk about stuff that's gone on this week. Ask us what we think about this, that and the other. You know, we're going to be on air for about an hour or something. So, yeah. What are we talking about tonight, Sammy?
Well, there have been some recent interesting protests in Iraq. Most notably, in the past couple of days, they infiltrated the Iraqi parliament and such.
Hold on. Just slow down a little bit. So, this week there's been how many attempts? There's been more than one, right? It's happened more than once.
Yeah, there's been a couple of attempts at storming the Iraqi parliament. Now, I've been following it over the past couple of days. They did start. Basically, the protesters. Who are the protesters? Well, the protesters are predominantly made up of followers of this person called Muqtada al-Sadr. Now, he is this Shia figure, religious figure in Iraq. He's not exactly from the progressive religious figures, such as the Axis of Resistance and such. And in fact, he, more often than not, directly or indirectly, has a stance against them, being that the Axis of Resistance and the one in Iraq, or the Axis of Resistance in Iraq, is presented by the Popular Mobilization Units. The Popular Mobilization Units, as we know, they fought off ISIS. They are pretty much allied with the other forces, such as Yemen, Hezbollah, the resistance in Lebanon, Syria, Iran. They, weirdly enough, they generally place themselves as politically neutral in Iraqi domestic affairs. They're like, look, we're gonna keep the security of the country, and we believe that security will bring along dialogue and therefore understanding, and therefore the Iraqi people will be able to put their decisions into practice as such. And now, take from that what you will, but Yeah, personally, I kind of wish they were a bit more active politically, a bit more bold politically, because it kind of resulted in backfiring on them. From what I see from like basically liberal democracy tainted with some, not even liberal democracy, just a system that is based on sectarianism,
Right.
because it was installed by the Americans. Anyway, moving further along. Protesters and followers of Muqtada Sadr basically a kind of indirectly maybe takes a position against the Axis of Resistance, calling them Iranian militias and such.
Yeah.
Or like stooges of Iran, etc. Which is a bit funny.
Yeah.
to be honest, but,
The regular smears, right?
yeah, and not only that, but a
They're
few
an
weeks
Iranian
back,
proxy.
Yeah. But also a few weeks back, Muqtada Sadr took a position that is in favor of normalization with the Zionist entity in the form of like religious trips or whatever. Like, for example, like Shia representatives would visit the Zionist entity, like under the premise of like a religious visit, so to speak, or whatever. Anyway, that was a controversial, that was something he was like a proponent of. This came directly after the Iraqi parliament unanimously voted against normalization and the criminalization of normalization, actually. But there was a tiny little bullet point in that bill that basically said what I just said, is that like the exception is religious visits, and Muqtada Sadr was one of those people who supported that.
Right,
Yeah, the one with that in. So, so not only that, but he's said some really grey area things in the past, such as this is like a Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It's like, what do we Iraqis have to do with this? Basically along those lines. So he's not exactly one of the progressive anti-imperialist figures. Now, these protesters, the followers of Muqtada Sadr, have stormed the Iraqi parliament, I believe today, or was it yesterday night?
They've done it twice now,
it was
haven't they?
yesterday. I'm not sure, to be honest,
They've done it
but
twice in the last few days.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
so, what I can remember is that it wasn't like the first time this kind of protest happens.
Oh, they've done it years ago as well.
It was like 2019. There was like a massive
NGO.
rally in the square, right?
It's like NGO. It's called the October movement or the Shireen movement. It was a very heavily NGO-esque style color revolution protests with random like gunfire from both sides of both security forces and from the protesters, the same way like how the Americans plant snipers in rooftops and fire both ways like they did in Ukraine and such. I'm not saying that definitely did happen, but it is basically the same playbook.
Yeah.
Now, ones a few days ago, they basically stormed the Iraqi parliament. There have been, like, I was following it, like, almost hour by hour. Now, Submarine News have been doing an excellent job of covering this whole thing. They were reporting injuries and deaths on both sides of the police force and the protesters. I believe at one point yesterday it reached like 20 injuries on the on the side of the police forces and like 30 injuries on the side of the protesters. Now, all sides were urging like both sides to restrain from using violence, and they were calling for like peaceful protests. Like basically they were saying, please make these protests peaceful. We don't mean no harm.
Yeah.
And this was on the government side as well.
Submarine.
Not only that, but,
and for anybody who isn't familiar with who Submarine are, who are they?
Well, it's basically a news agency that is quite pro-Axis of Resistance.
An Iraqi one, right?
Yeah, an Iraqi one, and they do excellent news of covering all all matters concerned with that, all matters connected with that. They're on Telegram. Not sure if they're on Twitter though. But yeah, just look up Submarine News. What else was I going to say? Oh yeah, even the Iranian foreign minister yesterday.
Let's have a look what the Washington Institute for Near East Policy says about Submarine News, right?
Oh really? They have something to say about them? I never even knew.
Submarine News is the main media conglomerate supporting all, and then in quotes, resistance actions and factions in Iraq, but quietly keeps a unique connection to Asib al-Haq.
Asib al-Haq, yeah, they're one of the resistance factions.
Right, okay. It's a media facade, apparently, for one or more armed groups, most prominently AAH, who you just mentioned. For most of the channel's existence, apparently, it's got non-kinetic information operations, focused social media propaganda, non-violent support to kinetic military, paramilitary and social operations aimed at weakening domestic and foreign opponents of the armed resistance groups, the USA and ISIS. History and objectives. Go on.
Basically, they're crying about how Submarine News is against the American occupation, aren't they?
Yeah. In a roundabout ways, without saying they're against the American occupation. Submarine News appeared on January the 11th, 2020 as a small channel on Telegram. By late 2020, it had become the most influential social media channel. It has over 180,000 Iraqi subscribers, apparently. Their role, management and staff has evolved through its history. Through a period of severe flux in late 2020 and early 2021. Blah, blah, blah. Closely mirroring strife between militias. I mean, they're steeping it on here, right? The channel's main objectives include promoting the cause, spreading disinformation, of course. I remember when... Spreading disinformation is a funny one. I remember when Real Madrid beat Liverpool in the Champions League last year, and the Submarine channel was just Iraqis celebrating Real Madrid beating Liverpool. Disinformation. For a variety of purposes, including to discredit the Iraqi government. As you've just said though, Sammy, they are reporting on this quite transparently, right? They're not discrediting the Iraqi government in any way more that they're discrediting the opponent for doing it, right? Would you say?
Yeah, I'd say they're fairly objective about, they're quite decently objective about their reporting. They do condemn the Iraqi government when needed, and do praise it when needed as well.
Okay, well this will answer the next one as well. It says inciting resistance supporters and other Iraqis against any parties or individuals deemed anti-resistance. In particular, they seek to counter the Iraqi protest movement known as the Tishrin. What's that?
Tishrin is Arabic for October. The October movement. That was the NGO-esque movement back in 2019.
Of course. Propagating anti-US sentiment as well. That's one of them. Promoting and disseminating real and fake news about kinetic operations carried out by facade groups. Promoting street vigilantism. Have you ever seen them do that? Organising activities related to vigilante and vigilante groups, engage in cyber operations.
Interestingly enough, they are almost the first ones to ever report on any kind of, well, not ever. I mean, they are almost always the first ones to report on cyber operations carried out by Iraqis against the Zionist entity. A few times when they attacked the public transport websites and the Zionist entity, a couple of other operations. Yeah, they're always the first ones to report on that. They're pretty good.
I like American sort of documents like that because the problem is someone writes it as if it's propaganda to be disseminated against the public, but they end up believing it themselves, which then renders it like completely obsolete because, like, do you know what I mean? If you believe your own propaganda, then the propaganda is now obsolete, isn't it? Because you fooled yourself, right?
Yeah.
But like that sort of, the US will write that sort of document on this. It's just an Iraqi news service, right? That is pro Iraqi, basically. But the US will write this big long list of claims that, like, you know, they're there to disseminate lies and all this crap. But that gets passed down to like another security agent who reads it and then believes it, rendering the whole process useless. Like, so I don't know. They make me laugh, those sort of rundowns, whilst Submarine or whatever just carries on reporting news to Iraqis and growing. Like it said in the document, since what, 2019 did it say they started? 2020, weren't it? And they've grown to being like the biggest media agency in Iraq, and they're trying to smear them of being like some sort of, it's like a hidden deep state propaganda. What? But it's somehow managed to grow to being the biggest, like, publicly loved agency in Iraq.
Sorry, what was the question?
I'm just saying, it's very funny, isn't it? These documents have got like little, they're very telling. Like, the Americans are going to claim that it's a propaganda outlet, but at the same time they're admitting that it's like the fastest growing channel in Iraq. So which is it? Do you know what I mean? Is it a false state-backed, bot-farmed, fake news outlet, or is it just the fastest growing media outlet in Iraq because that's what Iraqis like want? They just like want
yeah, exactly,
a media agency that's like honest to them.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what they are. As of now, they have over 200,000 followers on Telegram. Quite impressive. Not only that, but also a few days ago they released documents. I think they've gotten hold of somehow. Not sure how, but it was basically documents that I think we posted this on our Telegram, in fact. Basically saying how the government of Azerbaijan was supplying arms to the Ukrainian government via Sudan and Poland. Now, here I'm just going to read the segment from our post. Meridian is a Ukrainian company affiliated with the Ministry of Defense. Sihaz is Azerbaijani, owned by the Ministry of Defense as well. According to the documents, it is not clear what kind of
Slow down a
bombs,
bit. Read it slower. You're speaking very fast.
Basically, it was like cooperation between Ukrainian company and an Azerbaijani company, both owned by their respective ministries of defense. They were basically smuggling weapons to Ukraine, Azerbaijani weapons to Ukraine via Sudan and Poland. Those weapons include air bombs, most likely built for Sukhoi 24 bombers. Mm-hmm. So yeah, basically, despite Azerbaijan claiming its neutrality in the conflict in Ukraine, they were supplying arms to Ukraine, basically, the Azerbaijanis. Which is not it's not wholly a surprise. It's not fully a surprise, though, to be honest.
Well, of course,
Yeah, Azerbaijan isn't exactly the cornerstone of anti-imperialism.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. It's one of those countries that'll happily like just do its own thing.
Yeah. But yeah, moving on. The protests.
So anyway, carry on. So why they've been going on? Because it doesn't see like, it's not like strictly a US colour revolution, is it? It's more so that it's like a group that wanna, like, 2 steps back the resistance, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Do you know what I mean?
I would say so, yes. So basically, like, the growing incompetencies of like successive governments in Iraq have like seen certain protests, but with an onset of an Iraqi prime minister who is slightly more than the others, just slightly friendlier to Iran, that's when like Muqtada Sadr has called for basically
becomes an Iranian proxy.
He hasn't outright called him that, but basically he's called his supporters to like demonstrate in front of the Iraqi parliament and stormed it and such. So yeah, Muqtada Sadr isn't exactly the friendliest figure towards the axis of resistance. Not only that, it was basically I think that another reason behind it is some kind of electoral problems, because last elections in Iraq, obviously sectarian elections, because that's what the Americans installed there as a system, the Sadrist bloc got the largest number of Shiite seats, from what I understand. He was trying to build a coalition to form a government, which hasn't been happening for several reasons. I don't think he has enough seats or allies with him. Whatever the reasons are, it's a sectarian system, so things aren't going to look nice.
And also,
throw in some NGOs into the mixture. That is an easy recipe for color revolution.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the like Iraq is really, it's like really contested, isn't it? Don't get reported about enough in the West, does it? Because there's like still the US is still there, you know. The country's almost split in two. Blah blah blah.
Yeah, Turkey has had its fair share of, being the adversary. Adversary, is it? Sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly.
No, right, that's correct.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, or a little bit more than a week ago, Turkey, apart from bombing like the north of Iraq and the province of Duhok for the last 2 years maybe, last week they bombed a domestic tourist resort, and casualties included all ages, women.
A military tourist resort, is it? But yeah, carry on.
Yeah. Basically, civilians, children included, among those dead, and it just created an absolute uproar in Iraq. Rightly so, by the way. They called for the boycott of Turkish goods, Turkish institutions, to the degree that the Turkish embassy literally had to barricade itself in with massive concrete walls, and the Turkish visa issuing center had to shut down. I believe even Iraqi civilian flights stopped. No, I don't think it reached that level, but yeah, it just caused an absolute uproar in Iraq, rightly so. Following that, a couple of resistance factions have announced that they'll be continuously, they will increase their activity against Turkish occupation presence in Iraq as well. So you have the Turkish occupation along with the American occupation, the two largest armies in NATO.
Yeah, exactly. And like the two largest and like armed up as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, Turkey has its own defense industry. Yeah, they make their own drones. The drones, which in Ukraine haven't exactly proven to be very effective. I believe it's called the Bayraktar 3 drone or something.
Yeah, but they're so like cheap. They're so cheap that like they are effective because you just get another one.
I suppose, but like to the degree that even Zelensky himself, or I think it was either Zelensky or the Ukrainian defense minister, has said, they're not that useful. Because the Russians just keep shooting them all down.
But don't forget, there's a difference, isn't there? Because before the fighting started, they were quite effective at killing civilians, but they're maybe not so effective at war.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, not to laugh, but like when the Turkish drones came out in Donbass, that's when stuff got really bad over the last 8 years, right?
Yeah.
Carry on.
So yeah, the Iranian foreign minister yesterday issued a statement calling for all Iraqis to be wary of fitna, which is division and basically hate sowing. I think the proper translation is sowing hatred between the community. So he was basically saying be careful of that in light of the protests and the violence that happened in the past couple of days. Also, like, because if Iraq joins the axis of resistance at the state level, like Yemen and Syria, Iran, then that means a complete withdrawal of both Turkey and the US from, I would say, like, well, from Iraq at least, probably from Syria too, because as we know, the Americans occupy a part of the Iraqi-Syrian border.
And Turkey occupies parts of Syria as well.
Yeah, exactly. And geopolitically, that would essentially create a massive entity expanding from Iran to basically parts of Lebanon, basically Iran, Iraq, Syria.
Literally, the last thing that like the West wants, isn't it, is a united Arab region.
Not united Arab region, but just like the logistical aspect of it, the ability to transport goods, and essentially that'll be a lot easier for the axis of resistance. Instead of having to airlift everything from Iran to Syria and such, it'll just make things much more easier, and it'll improve their position massively on the ground in terms of the axis of resistance. And it'll also make Iraq independent foreign policy wise, just independent everything wise, really.
Because like Americans are like refusing to leave Iraq, aren't they? Like they just
they have
the Iraqi parliament is like go.
They have left mostly about 13-12 years ago, but the remnants of them still remain there.
And that's especially in Syria. That counts as not going still, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't go, we're gone, and then we've still got however many bases, and we're still influencing this, that, and the other using these NGOs, right?
Yep.
So, also this week, there's been some talks between China and Iran, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Vito, you go first, Sam.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to say, like, then Vito can go ahead. A couple of days ago, President Xi had a phone call with President Ibrahim Raisi, and it kind of confirmed what the feeling I had a while ago, and that was that China and Iran, interestingly, have a much stronger friendship than Iran and Russia. For example, Iran has demonstrated a positive neutrality kind of thing, calling for peace talks and such with the Ukraine matter. Even they don't even recognize Crimea yet. Or no, do they recognize Crimea as a part of Russia? I'm not 100% sure about that one. However, in comparison to their stance on the One China policy, a united China, they are absolutely adamant that Taiwan is a part of China, which it is. And yeah, that's their just full stance. They expressed that during the phone call. President Xi also expressed that they strongly want to hurry up the improvement of bilateral relations and the implementation of the 25-year deal, and to strengthen cooperation in all aspects, essentially. And I believe in November there are those military naval exercises of all Iran, China, and Russia in Latin America as well. So that's going to be quite exciting. Also, by the way, this phone call comes in light of Nancy Pelosi's visit to Asia, which is also interesting to see because I think Nancy Pelosi's trip to Asia is kind of the Americans wanting a repeat scenario of Ukraine. The Americans go too far. They perform so many provocations in order to provoke a reaction from China, and then from that reaction, the Americans will like make up a stage reaction where it's like, oh, we're not friends with you anymore, or like, you know what, that's it, because you invaded, we're going to cut you off from the rest of the world, sanctions and that. Essentially, they want to repeat with China what they did to Russia, such as cutting them off from the international banking system. all kinds of sanctions, just completely isolating them, include economically and culturally. And I think that started basically with COVID, basically, and etc. Trump's trade war, essentially. So I think that's coming very soon. That the cutoff from China, similar to the cutoff from Russia, I think that's within the coming months, not years, sadly. So Europe can kiss bye-bye to a nice warm winter.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I was going to say playing with fire, but it's like the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah, much.
Playing
so
with
yeah, go ahead, Vita. What do you want to say?
So, it might go along the lines with Iran, but I'm just gonna switch the perspective from Iran to Syria. So there was like a new development. Well, it wasn't like coming from the Zionist entity, subtly implying that the Chinese aid for Syria might have taken them by surprise, and it came from one of the websites saying that the recent announcement of Chinese aid for Syria is setting off alarm bells in Israeli security circles. So this is somewhat interesting because China and Israel do trade and do businesses, but they don't go along the lines to provoke each other. I mean, yeah, Israel does accuse China recently of the Uyghur genocide, which is pretty much not a good look when it comes to like the recent tragedy. But anyway, during they talked about the A, which is like the communication, advanced communications equipment, most certainly routers and online applications for rebuilding Syria's infrastructures, and which Syria and China did sign an agreement to, and it will be delivered in 2 batches to the Syrian Communication Technology Ministry. So that tells us that the Zionist entity is pretty concerned with how China sort of like deals with Syria in a constructive manner, but it wasn't really announced yet. But I think that Israel will also be trying to look into the Iran-China development more closely, because, as we all know, the Zionist entity did try have made numerous attempts to stop Iran from developing its own nuclear program, developing its
anything.
Anything that has to do with nuclear-based materials. So, it wasn't really it just came off it as something that we should be taking a look closely with how Israel is trying to navigate around with China having much more of a diplomatic relationship, much more with Syria and Iran and DPR, something like that. So yeah.
Like, but what's... They're just going to have to cope, though, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the world that we're in now, though.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as the... Like, China and Iran's relationship has gone up, has improved, like, 10, 15 times in the last year, right? Hypothetically, you know. And at the same time, like, Iran's relationship with Venezuela has improved 10, 15, you know, XXX amount in the last year as well, right? And that same can be said for Syria-Iran relations and all these little links that are being made, you know, with these countries that are just like, well, you know, as if, like Iran, like when we talked about Iraq a second ago, one thing that Sammy highlighted when he was talking about Iran is that they're not like interfering in another country, but they're like, well, you might as well be you've got to be unified as in you've got to use the state like to defend your like statehood from outside influences. So they're not going to then influence, but they'll just, you know, recommend a country does that, and then all of a sudden, you know, Iraq's an ally. It's why they get smeared as an Iranian proxy, right? What they mean by that is, oh, they're on good terms with Iran, right? That's all it means. They'd smear China as an Iranian proxy if they could get away with it, right? Go on, Vito.
What I will suspect from Israel is that it will alert the United States, and then we'll see a repeat of like certain rhetoric being spilled around China in order like. But it will not aim at the Western countries, but it will try to attempt a hedge between
Arab
China
countries,
and Syria or any other Arab countries.
Which is what exactly Iran is warning against happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. That's possibly
because Israel believes like some of the experts in Israel believes that the role of China will complicate the already chaotic efforts by Israel to conduct efforts in Syria, predicting that in a not so far future, Israel will have to coordinate its attacks on Iranian-related targets in Syria, not only with Russia but also with China. So, yeah, they will try to make an attempt to isolate China with the Arab countries, just to make Iran and Syria more vulnerable of their attacks, because because as we all know, they always try to pull a 1-2 punch, and this makes it more harder for them to do that anymore. But
shoe on the other foot here. Would you not say that like the Syrian civil war is an attempt at that anyway? So they've already sort of played their card, right? Sammy, would you not agree that like what Vito was talking about has like already happened in a way 10 years ago, and we're almost in the middle of that?
They're trying to separate China from the Arab countries.
Yeah, well, overall, but like,
I apologize because like it wasn't really that clear for me to hear, to be honest.
Well, what he's talking about is he's saying that, like, you know, Israel's objective in the region is to act as like a provoker, and it would be them that would be trying to split Syria off from being able to do conduct diplomacy with China, with Russia, etc. Now I'm saying, is the Syrian civil war not that already? Because it's influenced by the West and Zionist entity, etc. Right?
Yeah, definitely, I would say so. I mean, like Israel has been just a thorn since its existence. It has been a thorn against the unification of a peoples or a group of people in like the nation, and preventing them from development, preventing them from unification, and just being a bulwark of West imperialist region. And yeah, of course, the Zionist entity will like try to prevent China from cooperating with specifically Syria as well, or countries of the Axis of, because that is kind of detrimental to the Zionist entity in many ways. Because
it's kind of like why they exist as well as being detrimental to them. Like their existence.
Why they exist is basically because they are like.
Well, this is their job, right?
An American aircraft carrier in the shape of a state.
Yeah. That old classic technique, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is Vito's correct. Right, should we move on to another topic? What's happened
Absolutely.
this week? What else has happened? Big news, right? Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan. What do you think of that?
What I believe is that Nancy Pelosi will cancel her trip because I think
so what? Sorry.
Finally
Cancel.
We'll cancel her trip to Taiwan because I think that she and the Pentagon would have realized that it's going to end not in a way that the Americans want it to happen, but it will end bloody for America, China, and even the its own
the human race.
Its own part of China, which is Taiwan, because and I'll tell you one thing that sort of like makes it all tied together, which is the cross-strait relationships. There was a development between China and the and also the Strait of Taiwan, with development that goes with the collaborations of technology and medication and also tourism. It was pretty much something that most Westerners wouldn't have talked about unless it didn't really have a lot of hostilities for China to deal with. But it is something that China doesn't want to happen. But I think that this is why they're beefing up their drilling process and also their security. Once Nancy Pelosi in her coordinations to Taiwan, I think for a fact that China will really considering shooting that convoy down.
Do you mean if America was to advocate, right? I mean, it would be seen as an invasion.
Yeah.
Right?
But
which makes the US the aggressor, of course, in this, don't forget.
Yeah, which like most of the non-West world would have rejected the notions that China is borderline insane, because they pretty much like most of the people, not most of the countries, more than the Western countries, agree that Taiwan in the UN believe that not believe but agreed that Taiwan is part of China. So if anything that goes.
But I mean, just imagine if imagine if Russia wanted to send a diplomat to see some sort of American separatist in Texas and hold some sort of diplomatic meeting with an anti-American militia. Would the American government accept that, or would they see it as an act of aggression against them? They would, right? So, like, how is this? How is America managing to get away with this? Where they're just going, we're just going to do it. Like, what? What do you mean?
If they shut down if the PLA shut down Nancy Pelosi's plane, those countries that agreed that Taiwan is part of China would have said, no, we don't give a damn about what happened to that woman, and they would lose. America would have to save face and said that was and changed their tune, saying that that is not our problem. But they will go back to being hostile to China, much in a different way. Then the cycle of sort of like the cycle will certainly be continuing, and a hot war will not necessarily happen, but I guess there will be a massive rampant of hostilities.
Yeah.
And they would certainly try to sabotage China's own chip making productions in some capacity or form, just to make their points clear.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
And shoe on the other foot again. Like you said at the start, I think that it won't happen.
Yeah, because they got too much. They have too much to lose. They have much.
Yeah. Well, there's that. Well, there's that, but not only that. Like, so you've got like two examples going on that you can use. So the US wants to make out that it's got the capability to pick on China on China's doorstep as well. They're not like picking on them from afar and inviting them to come and invade the US. I mean, if the US was smart about wanting to defeat an enemy, it would be inviting them onto it, because no country on earth is invading the US successfully, right? It's a strategic. They've got lucky strategically, geography-wise, right?
Yeah.
So you would think that if they were to play it right, they would invite the enemy onto them, which they're not. They're talking about going to provoke right on the doorstep of China. But not only that, like, the US isn't even prepared to give like Ukraine a jet or two, an American jet, because it doesn't want like there to be footage. They don't want Russia to record footage of them shooting down an F whatever, right? Whatever they gave Ukraine, because they don't want that like propaganda loss of Russia going, here's us shooting down an American plane, right? Because that is a huge propaganda event. So, but the US isn't even prepared to do that. Then why all of a sudden is it going to be prepared to start a hot war where you're going to see more than fucking one F whatever get shot down? You're going to see like tankers, aircraft carriers get sank in the middle of the South China Sea, right? So the difference is like completely different ends of the scale, and they're not even prepared to do the lesser of the two. So I'm with you on this. I think all this is a load of America trying to look tough, but in reality, she'll go visit the countries that she can, go and visit, and then go back to the US, right? I think that's what happened. Just because of they won't even supply Ukraine properly because they don't want to get that. They don't want to see their expensive stuff get on. The reason for that is because then after an American jet gets shot down, how do they sell it to these puppet states? Because all these puppet leaders are going to go, I don't want an F whatever. We watched it get shot down. Do you know what I mean?
Here's the thing, though. the Taiwanese themselves don't even know how to operate one of those F-16A or F-35. Those are like leftovers, a leftover that is still pretty expensive for the China government to spend on, and they did really spend on that. And if that there was like a few incidents that they're trying to bury it as much as possible, but it's just that they might be able to use several of the military equipment that came out of the United States, but they're not be able to, like, as a collective, they're not able
good
to.
enough, though. You don't start a war with like the largest fucking standing army in the world on a might. Oh,
Yeah,
you might
no.
be
Yeah,
able
no.
to use. It's not happening, is it?
They're,
Like,
they're just
look.
selling
When
support.
China,
And
look, Vito
and
first.
Look at the lack of response from the China government. What? There's no there's no response from Joseph Wu. That is from the foreign ministry. The spokesperson from the foreign ministry. There's no response from from China herself. They knew that it will be it will be disastrous for them when the PLA really meant it. So they're not trying to make as many noise as possible. And of course, the Americans will do what Americans always does, which is like pushing their bullshit up in their asses and up to 11, and just
Saying things.
try to
saying things, right?
Yeah.
Like, you go on Twitter. This is the problem, isn't it? Like I'm saying about they believe their own stuff. You just look at like the tweets of some random Republican senator that's going, "Oh, America does this, and we will not do it." No, you won't. You won't. You will not be able to pick on China and walk away a victory. It won't happen. You didn't get a victory in no disrespect to Iraqis or Afghan people, right? But you didn't get a victory in Iraq or Afghanistan, and you think that you can leave Afghanistan, and like that wasn't even a year ago, was it? Right? It was like August. It was almost coming up to a year, right, before the US withdrew from its complete 20-year fucking failure.
Like those August deals, that was pretty hefty, and the submarines won't be able to operate until a few years later.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that at that time to provoke China before the submarines could be fully operational, you think that's going to do well for the Australian taxpayers when they force the Australian government to spend more money on defense? Like, I saw a report that came from ASPI that says that it wasn't enough to right now, like this year, from under the Albanese government, it's not enough to spend on defense. That's what they're saying. It's not enough to spend on defense, which is really what just getting more weapons for the Australian defense forces, which, by the way, wasn't sure wasn't really in the scale of things, they were able to take on China at this rate, at the scale. I'm sorry, I just generally don't think that. It's not even an
argument. It's not even an argument. This is a known fact, isn't it? That Iran, well, not even, like I just said a minute ago, Iraq and Afghanistan can defend itself from a full-scale US and plus allies invasion, right? Maybe not win.
They have to put this burden they have to exercise this burden every day, just to not get wholly destroyed by the United States and the Zionist entity.
Right, but what I'm trying to say is they they couldn't beat Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm not saying Afghanistan and Iraq beat the US. I mean, that's to be decided, really, isn't it, in the history books? But military games have proven that the US can't even beat Iran on its own. So why is it going to pick on? The US is smart to not involve itself properly in Ukraine, right? Because they know that they can't. And I think they're going to take that position over this. It's all just a load of shit to whip up some whatever they do it, I guess, just for clout or whatever it is. And they'll just she's not going to go, like you say. She's not going to go because, why would she? Was she going to? They'll be like, Nancy, your plane's going to get shot down. And she's going to be like, yeah, okay, take me. It's not going to happen, is it? They're not going to risk her over that. Be real. Life's not a film. You think about it. If that threat is actually on the table, they're not going to put her in that position anyway, right?
Yeah, no.
So go on.
And the whole visit to Taiwan was wholly just to just for the profits of her husband, because he bought a lot of stocks of Nvidia, which uses TSMC to power their products. So it's a really more of a strategic move. They're trying to frame it as they're trying to make it seems like it's just normal visits to Taiwan, but it's more like to use this to weaponize Taiwan. Yeah.
Well, of course, that's always the aim, right? In whatever country that they're doing this in. I mean, another thing that sort of confirms to me that nothing's going to happen is the last time the US won't even fly fucking spy planes over China and Russia, let alone let a fucking sitting Speaker of the House take a leisure trip over there, right? In a fucking slow moving passenger liner, right? Not going to happen. They've not flown over Russia since that the last CIA spy plane got shot down in 1972 or whatever. So geopolitically, the US is going to kick up a big stink about it and make out that they're going to, because you've got to play the part of being a world leader still, haven't they? And be able to show that they can puff their chest at China or whatever. But in reality, I think you're correct in what you said at first, and I don't think that they will risk it, because I think they know that it's their own downfall. They'll push it and push it and push it as much as they know they can push it, but they know their limit as well, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody believes their own propaganda at this point. Sammy, what do you think is going to happen?
I'm not quite sure with this specific visit, honestly, but this could not lead anywhere. The Nancy Pelosi visit, she could pull out of it. Mm-hmm. However, if things do, and if they do pull out of it, then the process of uncoupling from China would be a little bit delayed. If the visit does go through, then they're probably just going to continue, as I said, the many provocations that the US do in order to provoke a reaction. That's what I have to say about it, honestly.
Yeah, I guess that's right. I guess you can't say fair on that. Right, let's have a look at some of the comments, because there's not been many, but there's been some decent ones, and I think we can talk about some of them while we're on this topic. Someone says Iraq joining on the state level would... Oh, this is the resistance, right? Iraq joining the resistance on the state level would create a ring around American allies in the region and help the BRI, right? What do you think about that, Sammy?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I love that idea actually. Thanks for whoever posted it. Who
That was
posted it?
Yazid Al-Amri.
Thanks Yazid. Honestly, brilliant point right there. Props to you.
Yes. What else we got?
Maybe.
Phoebe says quite a lot. Let's have a look. The possibility of mistake mid-air is high. Is this if jets are scrambled? I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
Like I say, that would probably be like the worst case scenario. That like China just sees them off, Cold War style.
I think that Cold War style thing would be the scenario that we put forward, which is that uncoupling.
Sorry, what do you mean?
Yeah, like I'm saying that the Cold War case will be, or the
what you're saying is the US is attempting to like reset to a Cold War situation, right? In like a giant that makes sense, right?
It's like suspect he's like America will suspect China will use Russia will use nuclear weapons while China will believe that whatever they taught. I mean, China's pretty insistent on using the first strike. For not using the first strike implementation of the nuclear weapons. So that's not in the table. So yeah.
So it would be an aggressive move from the US to start that, right? But
yeah.
Now, saying that, right? Listen, now if the US was to provoke this situation, what would be said for what could be said for China like openly declaring support for Russia in like the Ukraine, for example?
Well, in some America's mind, that they made up the conclusion that China is already supporting Russia. So they're like, yeah, we're not just into like the assumption part. They're already conclusive about, like, some of them are already conclusive about China's being supportive of Russia, and yeah.
So do you think that's a possibility though? I don't think it is. I think China's the kind of country that will always try to. I don't think they will provoke back. I think they'll push it. Like I say, I think if the US tries, they'll just like see them off. Do you know what I mean? Like the US isn't going to fire upon China seeing her off. So it would just be like, okay, well they kind of flew close to each other or whatever, right? But
yeah.
It would take something like a mistake happening in the air for like a war situation to break out. That's my opinion anyway. I think they would just like, the US is not going to push it past being told to fuck off, right? Basically.
Yeah. It could be something like a Cuban Missile Crisis.
Well, it is kind of like that situation, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah, but it's in Taiwan instead of Cuba.
Well, exactly.
And
but I don't see China like supporting it. Like if Pelosi tries, they'll just see her off. They're not gonna like, oh well, now we're gonna support Ukraine. Do you know what I mean? Russia in Ukraine.
Yeah.
I don't think that would happen. China will always like seek peace, right, over hostility. Yeah. So even if the US was to cross the red line, it would be dealt with peace in mind, right? Well, Sammy, what did you say?
I was just going to say, what you're saying is that they'll try to seek out every possibility at like dialogue possible.
Well, of course, right? Especially when, and don't forget, it's their territory that's been encroached. So by default, by design, this is an aggressive move by the US. Like I said earlier, imagine if Russia tried to come to meet a anti-US militia in American territory, right? It just wouldn't fly, would it? America would see it as aggressive, and people would be getting arrested or whatever. So, you know. The Chinese Air Force will do what they have to do. They'll avoid shooting them down. The Chinese government always looks to the long term, and this isn't conducive to anything positive to them. Exactly that. It's not conducive to like anything positive, not just for them, for like all humanity. UK plus 30 vassals failed 2 times in Iraq, and the Taliban just won in Afghanistan. But look how quick the Taliban swept across Iraq afterwards. The US was meant to have been building a state, in Afghanistan. So. They use proxies. Yeah, of course. Which is something the game Metal Gear Solid predicted, didn't it? That war would be fought on proxy front.
It sort of. Well,
I don't like doing that. Referencing culture.
Yeah. I mean, it tried to pull in something that is far ahead with how the internet works, but I can see that the series as a whole, does not really attempt to critique what a unipolar world looks like, or what a multipolar world looks like, because it's so stringent in the discourse that uses the internet and also the information war as just something that we observe but not really wholly participate in it. But it's cool to know that the MGS did really, ahead of this time, did really try to introduce something that a lot of players would find it fascinating, like information warfare and stuff, something like that.
Right. Before we finish, I wanted to. Okay, here we go. I found it. Here's what Donald Trump said. Why is Nancy Pelosi getting involved with China and Taiwan other than to make trouble and more money, possibly involving insider trading and information for her cheating, with a comma on the end, cheating husband? Everything she touches turns to chaos, disruption, and crap. Her second biggest Congress flop happening now! ! And the China mess is the last thing she should be involved in. She will only make it worse. Crazy Nancy just inserts herself and causes great friction and hatred. She's such a mess! ! That was Trump. Crazy Nancy. And there's another one I wanted to read on what you just said there, Vito, from Putin himself. Here we go. Before I read this one out, Cosmo in the chat says, "Where's the plane?" I read something before we went on air, and you'd have to go and have a look this up because I've not checked since, but something like that, because of I don't know, some story saying that the plane had stopped being tracked or something. Something like that. Right, anyway, here's a Putin quote. Putin, wherever you are in the world. Our main mistake in communicating with the West is that we trusted you too much. And your main mistake is that you took trust as a weakness and abused it. That was Putin in 2017.
Yeah. It's just, it just right in the face of it, and we're too stupid. We're not. we didn't have enough of foresight to see what was happening at that time, and I think that Putin really did, have a realization that the West will not accept.
When he got elected in 1999, his government was about dealing with the West on mutual level, right? And that just never happened.
Because Yeltsin.
You've gone quiet there, Vito.
Yeah. Sorry?
There you go, that's better. You went all quiet.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Because Yeltsin recommended Putin to the West as the president, and now like Putin did everything like he needed to gain the West trust, and then it wasn't really enough, and they had to pull a coup onto Russia's neighboring country, and that was like the line that clearly really have shown how much of his patients wearing thin about the and the level of trust has been deteriorating over the years, and
Since
I think I think that we should at least give Putin some credit about how shitty we shouldn't really trust what the West has been saying on a geopolitical scale, because we think.
I mean, at the end of the day, right? There's something to be said for like. If one country is saying we're not being treated fairly, right, and the other side is just saying, well, this guy's evil and not really giving you no evidence to suggest it, then, I mean, that seems fishy in the first place, isn't it? Like, you should probably
it's like
maybe have a look into
I'll take one of the examples that might fascinate some people, which is, in some of the times me and my fam would have like crabs. Would have like minced crabs that fully that we need to take off the shells in order to eat the meat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are you guys following? So you can have the entire meat to be eaten, except like there was one spot where you can't eat. There was like a mold, a black mold under the crab,
right?
Which you have to remove it before you eat the rest of the crab meat.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
You're listening, Sammy. You're not playing chess here.
Yeah.
Good. Carry on.
That star stripe mold is like a thing where if you digested it, it will have some sort of reaction to your
You've gone quiet again, Vito.
And it will have a reaction.
Vito, you've gone quiet.
Maybe try getting closer to the mic or something.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Go on, carry on.
So it's kind of like an analogy of like how much we the sort of like the how much we shouldn't have to believe what that like the mole represents the American 1%, which is like the ruling elite that try to dictate the foreign policy, because most of the things that we listen from are from the media class that have been saying a lot about China, whether it's like really benign cases of mistreatment or whatever.
I mean,
it's sort of like
Theo, I'm just amazed that you made an analogy that
Yeah.
resulted in the 1% being represented by a piece of mold. So well done.
Yeah.
Fitting.
Yeah.
Right.
And like that. I'll just get to that one part.
Go
Then I'm done. So there was this case a few weeks ago. Yeah, the Hainan bank fraud, which resulted that the depositors can't get their savings from the banks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole media latches on just only a few weeks later after it happened, but they will talk smack about how much China is corrupted, financial, has the ruling elites have the people's money and stuff like that, but they will never ever, like, assuming they know Chinese, which I know like 70% of them do, they would have realized that the financial commission, the Financial Regulatory Commission, has pulled out a notice, a sign that says that we're going to investigate this whole matter. And if anyone's being affected by the by the bank's mess, we're going to have them compensate for you if they have like with the amount that they were owned. But if people have been exploiting this whole thing by raising their interest rate, we're going to come after you for breaking the law. That's what, like, that is like the cleanest response that came out of the regulatory commission. But they won't ever report on the aftermath of those of the incidents. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So, every time, it's always the labor struggle and not the solution that got like sorted out, and you know it's now done.
Yeah, and you wonder, and people wonder why and people would accuse us as being shills when. Let's face it, like over 90% of the people would support what the party have done, and they would, they would genuinely see it with their eyes. Weren't
they making out like a week later that the PLA was protecting the bank or some ridiculous claim? Like,
yeah, no.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine if? I mean, it probably would happen, right? Let's be right. The police in America is fully militarized. Could you imagine if? Could you imagine if, like, just one morning there was some bank in downtown New York that had some dispute over its customers, and then the next day that the whole US military was defending this bank? It just wouldn't happen, would it? That's the logic. Like, if you think about this story logically, it just doesn't make sense, does it? It just doesn't make sense. No. But it gets put out and spanned, and it's real, right? And no retraction, or they'll do a retraction, but it's too late by then, isn't it? Because you've put it out, and only 90% of the people who saw the original don't see the retraction. So it's almost true then, isn't it?
Yeah. And the report that says that there are tanks around the Hainan banks have been, they were wrong. It was, well,
that's what I'm saying. They're wrong, but like it doesn't really matter if they're wrong or not, because
another place. Yeah.
If you hide the retraction and don't publish it with the same amount of willingness as you did the original story, then it might as well be true, because you've left 90% of the people who read the original story still believe in the original. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so
yeah,
it's part of the trick, isn't it, to do that? It's so easy for them to do it.
Yeah.
But like I say, you've got to think logically about the story. Think about it. Does that sound logical that like a state would send out its military its state military to defend one single branch of a bank that was going through some sort of customer dispute. Would that happen in the US? Would a bank be able to just contract the US military to come out? Well, it wouldn't.
Here's the thing, though, that people wouldn't think about it, because Obama after the financial crisis, he would just bail out the bankers, and there wouldn't be any there was the
exactly.
there was the protest against the bankers, but it was
it failed.
It went out it failed.
But I mean, even saying that, the US will happily put the military out in front of the White House, like it did in 2020? In 2020,
yeah, it was
put the fences up, and there was a military protecting the White House from their own people. So what are you on about? There you go. Anyway,
Vito,
I'm gonna have to cut you short. I'm gonna have to cut you short. It's the end of the show. So hold that thought, and then we'll talk about it next time. Sammy, you still with us, right?
Yep.
It's the end of the show. Too many has said in the chat they turned the transponder off in Hawaii. So there you go. We don't know where Pelosi is. She's going to Japan, Korea, and I can't remember where else. But is it Malaysia? Somewhere like that. And then allegedly Taiwan. So we'll have to see what happens. Follow the story on our Telegram at t.me/MangoPress if you're not already there. If you're not done already, please like this video, and also press that subscribe button if you're not subscribed to our channel. Links to all our fundraising stuff down there as well. We've got a Patreon, we've got a merch shop on our website. All that stuff goes into server costs and improving streaming and all that stuff. So yeah, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. Tom just must be passed out. Poor old man with his slippers and his cane. He's had a few beers too many.
And this year-old dog is quite stereotypical of an old man as well, because this dog is absolutely tiny. My cat can beat that dog.
You what?
My cat can beat that dog that he has.
Cats can beat most dogs though. Cats are pretty solid really, aren't they? Because they're agile.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's not start a debate on cats versus dogs. We'll be back next Tuesday, Sammy. We're doing a Tuesday stream?
It depends, but most likely yes.
Alright, cool. I was speaking to Tom, not Sleepy Tom, Welsh Tom, the other day, and he was like, "Oh, you're just trying to get me to be a Tuesday co-presenter subtly, aren't you?" And I was like, "Actually, yes, I am. Now you've said that, so there you go, Sammy. We'll end up with another presenter on Tuesday. We'll have Welsh Tom, hopefully."
All right, brilliant.
He's roped himself in. He roped himself in. Anyway, Vito, thanks for joining us. Go and get some sleep now as well yourself.
Yeah. Thanks,
Sammy,
guys.
We get to go and get some sleep as well, because it's 12:30 here as well. So thanks. I'm gonna let this music play out. If you want our Patreon or anything, just ask on Telegram. I'm not gonna advertise it. I just can't be bothered. Kill me.
It's that time of night.
Yeah. The music's going to play out now. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good morning.